The following segments are pre-recorded and sponsored by Longworth Productions.
Report from Congress on Triad today. Hello everyone, I'm Jim Longworth and welcome to another edition of Triad Today. It's a special edition because over the next half hour we're going to spend our time speaking with Kathy Manning and Ted Budd. Kathy, of course, our Congresswoman from the 6th District. Ted, our newly elected U.S. Senator. And we're so glad to have them. Before we get to that, though, a few words from Todd Hall, President and CEO of Triad Federal Credit Union, who's helping to make this show possible.
In this heightened political climate, it's especially important to find resources that separate the noise from the news. A resource that focuses on what's going on in our government and how current and proposed initiatives might impact our community. That's why Triad Federal Credit Union supports Triad Today and its commitment to voter education. I'm Todd Hall, President and CEO of Triad, and we hope you enjoy this special report from Congress.
We'll be back with Kathy Manning.
Banking is like going for a swim. You don't need all the complicated stuff, but you don't want to feel exposed either. At Triad, we give you just what you need, so you can manage your money on the go or stop by a branch whenever you need to. It's all about having options, while also keeping life simple, with low rates, free financial advice, and friendly faces. So check out Triad. We have just what you need.
Back now in this special voter education edition of Triad Today, brought to you in part by the good folks at Triad Federal Credit Union and coming to you from the beautiful Senior Botanical Garden in Kernersville. Well, we have a beautiful setting and a beautiful lady with us. Kathy Manning, of course, is a Congresswoman from the 6th District. She's with us, and we're so glad that you could stop by and spend a few minutes here.
My pleasure. I'm always happy to be with you.
Let's talk about, we have about 12 minutes to go, so I'm going to run through a drill of some things that I was interested in that you either introduced in Congress or passed or voted for. And let's start with health care. You've been working on several health care related bills, according to my notes, maternal health, health data, mental health, lots of things. Tell me about all these bills and how they're going to benefit people.
Great. Well, you know, Jim, since the minute I got to Congress, I was determined to make health care more accessible and more affordable for people in the 6th District and all across the country. Because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So I have worked on a lot of bills that I believe are going to do exactly that, make health care more accessible and more affordable. Let me start with the Inflation Reduction Act, which brought down the cost of health care premiums, capped out-of-pocket costs for prescription medication, and lowered the cost of insulin to $35 a month for seniors, for people on Medicare.
Right.
And that has also rolled over into bringing down the cost of insulin for everybody, as two major manufacturers of insulin have announced that they would cap the cost of insulin for everybody. That's the Inflation Reduction Act. I have introduced the Mental Health Wellness in Schools Act. We know we have a crisis, a mental health crisis of our students, and increase in suicides, increase in mental health emergency room visits. So my bill would integrate mental health education and services into the wellness programs that are already taking place in our schools.
Maybe even prevent some of these folks that have a problem, mental problem, that are getting guns.
We need, absolutely, and we need to make sure that students understand that when they are having mental health issues, they should be seeking help, and we need to increase the resources in our schools so that we have more mental health providers in the schools. The Health Data Act is a bipartisan bill I am delighted to be co-sponsoring. Basically, it would require more transparency in what particularly insurance companies and pharmacy benefits managers are charging for medications. Because if employers have more information about what their employees will actually have to pay for their medications, that'll help employers choose the best insurance policies for their people.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about contraception for just a moment. You've been a strong advocate for women's health issues that we talked about, and this year you introduced something called the Right to Contraception Act. What was that?
Actually, I introduced it in the last Congress, and it passed in the House. When the Dobbs opinion, which did away with Roe versus Wade, was issued, Clarence Thomas wrote a concurring opinion in which he said he wanted to revisit 3 long-standing Supreme Court cases, one of which was Griswold versus Connecticut. That was the 1965 Supreme Court case that first recognized that a woman had the right to use contraception, birth control.
Right.
And Clarence Thomas basically said it's time to overturn the case that established a woman's right to use birth control. So
he might have been on a private jet somewhere when he thought that up. So.
I don't know where he was, but I can tell you that the vast majority of American women use birth control at some point during their lives. And birth control is critical to allow women to decide whether, when, and with whom to have children.
I want to pick at you for just a second because you're a great mom, aside from just being a great legislator, and stay on this subject of contraception. The FDA, as you know, recently approved an over-the-counter birth control pill that can be purchased by, and I'm going to say this for the audience, for anyone at any age. Okay, now here's my question. As a mom, wouldn't that concern you, say, if your daughter were 13?
So let me just first mention that the decision by the FDA to allow the O-pill to be purchased over the counter was really historic. For the first time, it allows women to determine, to go get their own birth control pills without having to pass the hurdle of going to a doctor, paying for a doctor's appointment, and paying for an over-the-counter prescription.
That's right, but if your daughter's 13, 14, 15, is she a woman?
We have to remember what an unwanted pregnancy does to a girl's life. I've been talking with physicians, particularly in connection with my Right to Contraception Act, about what qualifies as a high-risk pregnancy. And doctor after doctor has said to me, all pregnancies are high-risk situations. What a pregnancy does to a woman or a girl's body puts the body at risk for those 9 months. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we help women avoid unwanted pregnancies.
Okay. Now let's switch to workforce development for a minute. You were named recently as the chairperson of the task force on workforce development. What are the goals of that task force, and what kind of impact can you have on our economy?
As I've talked with employers, big employers, small employers all across this district, in every segment of our economy, I have heard that they cannot find enough workers. And in our area, we have this growth of new jobs with, as you know, the Toyota battery factory, Sonic Boom, and Marshall Aviation. We have all kinds of new companies coming in here. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful for our economy, but our employers are frightened that they will not be able to find well-trained workers. So this is taking place in our district. It's taking place across the country. So the goal of the task force is, number one, to have a clear understanding of what our workforce needs are in this country. Number two, to make sure that we are providing the training necessary to make sure that Americans can get the tools and training they need to get these good paying jobs. I've already brought in more than $50 million to the 6th district to help with workforce training, with truck driver training, with nurse training, with training in the clean energy environment.
Right.
We just got a big grant recently for North Carolina A&T State University. And this task force will continue to make sure that we're helping workers get the training that they need so employers can hire well-trained employees.
Absolutely. Now, you supported the PACT Act. Let's talk about veterans for a minute. I understand it's got something to do with helping veterans, but in what way?
So the PACT Act was critically important to make sure that veterans, particularly post-9/11 veterans, can get the health care they need for those people who were exposed to toxins, both toxic burn pits, contaminated water, particularly at Camp Lejeune. And this bill finally allows those veterans that have contracted illnesses because of exposure to toxins to get the care they need, and it streamlines the process for applying for those benefits.
A lot of what we've been talking about so far has to do with the funding, and you've been great about getting funding for this area and for helping everybody. But you know, a lot of folks, or I guess the majority of Americans now, are saying that we're kind of tired of sending money and aid and equipment to Ukraine. Is there an end date on that? Are we just going to keep doing that?
So let's remember how we got there. Russia, under the leadership of the totalitarian Vladimir Putin, invaded a sovereign democratic nation. The Russian soldiers have committed atrocious war crimes. They have murdered, they have raped, they have kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children, taken them back to Russia and engaged in forced adoptions. They have targeted civilians, they've targeted maternity centers. We cannot allow an autocrat, a totalitarian a dictator to take over a sovereign democratic nation. And if we remember our history, we know that an autocrat who's determined to expand the land he rules will not stop with Ukraine. And what will come next will be some of our NATO allies. Right now, all we're being asked to do is help provide military equipment and training. If we don't stop Putin at Ukraine, next will come some of our NATO allies, and then we'll be obligated not just to send military equipment, but our troops.
Sure. Now, the Affordable Connectivity Program is about the internet. Very quickly, why is that so important for North Carolina?
We have more than 400,000 people in North Carolina who did not have access to affordable internet or access to the internet at all.
Right.
During COVID, we saw how important it was to have access to the internet for our school kids to learn, for people to run small businesses.
A lot of them fell behind because they didn't have access.
They fell way behind, and people who could not see their doctors with telehealth visits because they couldn't get access to the internet. So this program has already helped 60,000 people in the 6th District with $30 a month credit to help afford internet. We know that 51,000 more families qualify for this connectivity program. We're hoping that they fill out those applications so that they can get access to the internet in an affordable way.
As you know, just about every school district in the nation has a shortage of bus drivers. Now, I know folks at home are thinking, why do you want to take the Congresswoman's time to talk about school buses? Well, because there's a connection. It used to be that high school kids could drive school buses, but in 1988, the Department of Labor said, no, we're not going to allow you to do that anymore. Some groups are now saying, can we go back and revisit that and let high school kids drive school buses?
We have a school bus shortage that is having a dramatically negative effect on our school kids. In fact, just last weekend I was in Rockingham County and I was talking to some high school students who told me that their high school doesn't start until 9:20, doesn't get out until 5:30. And that means that kids who are used to working to save for college after school can't take jobs after school. It impacts their ability to participate in sports. This is really causing major problems with our school system. So we've got to figure out creative ways to solve the school bus shortage, the school bus driver shortage.
Right.
And I have to tell you, when we were growing up, responsible students did drive school buses.
Yeah.
And if they are able to do it safely, I leave that to our school district to make that determination. But it has worked in the past.
All right. For more information on what Congresswoman Manning is working on and all the different things, the legislation going on, please check out manning.house.gov, manning.house.gov. I thank you so much for being with us today.
A pleasure. I wish we had 2 hours to speak because we're doing so much in Washington.
That's right. And I'm glad you're feeling better from your accident.
Much better.
We're so glad you're here with us.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, by the way.
Thanks very much.
And let me know where Clarence Thomas is flying to. I want to try to follow that. I'm going to track it with my GP, whatever. We'll be right back after this.
Veterans, when you're struggling, soon becomes later, becomes someday, becomes when. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Back now on this special edition of Triad Today as we give you our report from Congress, and we're so pleased and honored to have our good friend Ted Budd, the United States Senator from North Carolina. Welcome to the show again.
Glad to be here, Jim.
Let's bring folks up to speed on a number of things, issues that you're working on, issues that are important to everybody. Let's start with the economy. We talked about inflation the last time you were here. Since then, President Biden has talked about Bidenomics. He's talked about how strong the economy is. Do you agree with what's going on? Is inflation down? Are we producing jobs? Or where do we stand?
I think don't just ask me, ask the American people, and his favorability is down to 36%, which is really a record low. They're not pleased. They know that life is more expensive, the groceries are more expensive, so is gas, so is energy. They're trying to go somewhere. I know summer is about over, but they tried to travel with their families this summer. Airline tickets are up 50%. So, I mean, it's tough on folks out there. Now, the annualized, they say it's down a little bit, but again, it's not down from the highs of where it was before. So it's not selling well to the American people because he's not done a great job.
You recently introduced something called the Middle Class Borrower Protection Act. I got that right, didn't I? Okay.
That's right.
What was the purpose? What's the purpose of that legislation, and where does it stand now?
Yeah, that's really to protect the American consumer, especially middle-class borrowers out there around mortgages who've done such a good job to try to protect their credit score. They've been responsible, they've paid their bills on time, and it's reflected in their credit score. But what the Biden administration wants to do is punish them and charge them an additional fee to offset those who've not been as responsible by protecting their credit score. And so we just think that's bad policy, that's unfair, and that's socialism, and that's what Joe Biden's done. So that's what the bill's about.
You sponsored a bill this year also to help small businesses use their government loans to finance technology. Talk about that some.
It's one of the great committees I've been able to serve on. Again, in the House, we had one committee. Now I've got 4 big committees, including small business. If you use the SBA, Small Business Administration 7A loans, we want them to be able to use that money so they can go out and reinvest in their company, to put in technology, to manage inventory, to manage accounting, put in good systems that can help them compete with the bigger companies and grow the local economy.
Makes us more competitive globally as well, and it's interesting. So you got on that committee as soon as you went to the Senate,
right.
Got in there. We've spent over $75 billion so far in aid to Ukraine, and I guess it's just me making a comment, but it seems like there's no end in sight. I guess I have 2 questions for you on that. One is, should we cut the aid off now? Is enough enough? Or 2, should we at least have some kind of exit strategy on the aid that's going out? What do you think?
Well, I think there has to be an exit strategy. You know, to be successful, you always have to begin with the end in mind. But let's really go back to August of 2021. So 2 years ago now, where our hearts were broken with how Biden withdrew from Afghanistan. We'd given our heart, our blood, our toil over the last 20 years. We are grateful for the veterans and those who had lost their lives there. But when he pulled out in such a chaotic way, the world was watching. China was watching. Russia was watching. We wouldn't have the Ukraine problem now if it weren't for what Biden did in Afghanistan. So what people are frustrated about is I don't think they mind helping our neighbors or helping Ukraine. What they don't want to do is give money away endlessly. They don't want it used irresponsibly. They want Europe to step up. They want those who are even closer to be first and foremost those that are supporting the effort against the atrocities that Russia is committing against Ukraine.
Are you one of those that favors letting Ukraine into NATO, and if so, you go along with what Biden said to, hey, let's wait and see how the war ends and that kind of thing before we vote on that? Where do you stand on that?
No, because of Article 5, which is really the key component of NATO, if someone is attacked, it's as if we're all attacked, and so you can't retroactively bring them in, and then we would have to implement Article 5 if you were really abiding by the NATO premises. So I would be opposed to it now. We need to support them, but we need to do it with accountability. People want to know where their taxpayer dollars are being spent. They want to know that Europe and the closer allies are stepping up first. But we're learning a lot through signals intelligence. China's watching what we're doing here. Iran is watching what we're doing here. North Korea is watching. And what we have to do is project American strength, not weakness, points, which is what Biden started doing in August of 2021.
Yeah, for as much chaos as China can seem to cause, their economy is not in the greatest shape either right now, so that's going to be interesting to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, they've had decades of a bad, one-child policy. They've had horrible capital allocations, so they've been bad actors on the world scene. They've tried to punish us, but again, I'm very optimistic about the U.S. and the U.S. economy if we get a good administration there. But again, it doesn't have a good outlook for China.
You emailed me one day and said that, it reminded me that you had sponsored or introduced the Veterans Protection from Fraud Act. What is that about?
Well, there's a lot of great folks out there, but unfortunately, there's some bad actors who want to take advantage of those in their time of need, particularly veterans. And we want to enlarge and enhance the punishments against them, and longer jail time, bigger fines if they go after veterans and target them. We want to protect those that have served our country and protected us.
Absolutely. You introduced us something called the Religious Liberty for Faith-Based Contractors. As I ask you about this, I'm also wondering, don't we have something kind of like a separation of church and state, and why are you involved in this, and what is it? So school me on this.
Well, we also have freedom of religion, that's a First Amendment right. But if the federal government is paying a nonprofit or a religious affiliated group to do a particular service, then those people ought to be able to abide by their own religious beliefs without it being I guess, overridden by the government. So that's what we're doing. Trump protected this. Biden rescinded the rule. He didn't allow these First Amendment protections. So we want freedom of religion, even for those that are being paid by the federal government. So it's only right. I hope people will look at this. It's a CRA, or a Congressional Review Act, which means we rescind the rule that the Biden administration has put in place.
Give me we didn't rehearse this, but give me a practical example of something. You don't have to name a specific business. You're a business owner too. How would that work? How do you protect it?
Let's say it was a faith-based daycare, and they had certain beliefs, Christian beliefs, Jewish beliefs, Islamic, but let's say that they were being paid by the federal government to provide daycare, and people said, you can't abide by your own religious beliefs as you're providing that service. We would say you actually can abide by your own religious beliefs, and that should be unimpeded by the federal government.
I got you. Now, let's switch to the Supreme Court for just a minute. Now that you're in the Senate, you have to deal with that directly, with nominations and all sorts of things. We've had several justices on both sides of the aisle sort of getting a little bit of trouble with, I'm going to call them ethical violations or questions about ethics in terms of trips and gifts. And I don't want to get into specifics or name names, but you know what I'm talking about. Now, here's my thing. Are you for or against these lifetime appointments of Supreme Court justices? Is that something you should look at?
When you go to the root of this, it's the media not being happy. No offense there, Jim.
But I am offended, and the show's over. This is the end of the show.
And it's the left not being happy because SCOTUS has ruled against them in several instances. But it's an independent judiciary. It should stay that way. It's Article 3 of the Constitution, not Article 1, not Article 2. I'm Article 1. The President's Article 2. Supreme Court's Article 3. It's separate. It should stay that way, and realize that the root of this recent concern is really sour grapes from the left.
All right. Now, you and some of your colleagues in the Senate have backed a plan to support nuclear energy. Why are you doing it, and what does it entail?
No, it's a bipartisan effort, too, and I want to be known as an all-of-the-above person who believes that whether it's natural gas, whether it's coal, whether it's renewables, we need to have a mixture of all of them. But nuclear could provide for the base load. It's cheap, it's clean, it creates no pollution. It's safer than it's ever been. We have new generations of technology coming out, and it helps all of our lives. It makes lives better for all of us here in North Carolina and the rest of the country, so that's why I'm for it.
Shifting to student loan debt, President Biden, as you know, tried once before to do this, and it got challenged in court and knocked down and disappointed a lot of kids who were starting their application process. Now he's touting a different version of it. Is any of this ever going to work?
It doesn't seem so, because it was unconstitutional the first time, and I believe it will be this time. But really, it's about taking money from those that have either paid off their college loans diligently over years. They've been very prudent to do that. Or those who never even had a college degree and went right to work, which is the case for most Americans. And it takes money from them as diligent taxpayers that they are and gives it to those that for some reason don't want to pay off their college loans. So I think that's very unfair to most Americans.
Let's talk for a minute about UFOs. And I'm just kidding around with it. I mean, it's a serious question, but when I was growing up in the 50s and early 60s, of course, everything was science fiction this and science fiction that, and men from the moon and flying saucers. And it seems like Congress is sort of gearing up to put more and more money into research, into identifying UFOs. We have so many problems here at home, as you pointed out before, things we need to work on with the economy and everything. Do we need to be pumping more and more money into UFO programs?
Look, the key word there is U, or unknown, and it's UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomenon now. So new name, but same old problem. We can't let it be a distraction for focus on the things that we really know are challenges, like the economy, like national defense, like cybersecurity. So those are things we know we need to work on. We need to keep our eye on it. We need to make sure American airspace is safe. I don't think it's really an issue of extraterrestrial. It's like, what do we know and what do we not know? And let's keep an eye on it, make sure Americans are safe.
Goes back to the China thing. You want to know, as a member of the Senate,
absolutely,
or what's flying out there.
And since you mentioned that, a UAP was the Chinese spy balloon that came over in February, late January, early February.
Absolutely. I want to take the last couple of minutes to talk about maybe some personal things, because I'm wondering, you served several terms in Congress, and then you went over, man, just like that, into the United States Senate. How is it different for you personally?
2 years of an overnight success, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it was absolutely my privilege to serve in the U.S. House. The district changed a few times, either 6 or 10 counties, and it's a special place in my heart, even right here where I've had a chance to represent. But I would say things in the Senate, they're slower, they're heavier, you have less colleagues. It's much more international, these congressional delegation trips where we're not an ambassador as appointed by the president, but we do represent the U.S. Much more involved in different areas, because I had one committee in the U.S. House, as I mentioned before, but now we have 4, and it's commerce, it's armed services, it's the Health Committee, which is health, education, labor, and pensions, and then small business. So that's a pretty heavy load.
And it's keeping you busy. Up on screen, bud.senate.gov. Please check that out for more detailed information on how the senator stands on things and the issues he's working. I appreciate you doing this. And
thank you.
Even though you insulted the media during this this interview.
But not you, Jim.
No, not me. Boy, what a diplomat. We'll be right back after this.
A brighter energy future starts today, and we're ready. We're leading the clean energy transition, cutting carbon emissions even while improving reliability, adding more renewables like solar and wind, all while managing our costs to help keep energy affordable for everyone. We're Duke Energy, and we're building a smarter energy future for you.
Hi, I'm Jim Longworth, reminding you that Triad Today is now streaming on WFMY Plus, available free on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Well, that's it for this special voter education edition of Triad Today, and I'm so glad you could stay with us for it, and so glad that we were joined by 2 great folks. Congresswoman Kathy Manning represents the 6th District, and United States Senator Ted Budd. Now, I want to put up a couple of websites on that. Manning.house.gov. I hope you'll check that out. Manning.house.gov. And also bud.senate.gov. That's bud.senate.gov. And I want to also thank especially the good folks, Todd Hall, Attica Simpson, and the whole team at Truliant Federal Credit Union for helping to make this show possible. Their website, of course, truliantfcu.org. And a shout out once again to the good folks here at Senior Botanical Garden. The website's on screen. You can come out and visit the garden anytime. They'd love to have you. For all of us here, Triad Today, I'm Jim Longworth. We'll see you next time.